Quickness Deadeye is a build that is surprisingly easy to play, easily covers permanent quickness for your group, and pumps out enough DPS to make everyone else in your squad exceedingly nervous. So sit back and let's get cracking with the highest damage of any boon provider in Guild Wars 2, and keep every other DPS player on their toes. Quickness Deadeye has returned from the Shadow Realm and is easily the highest damaging boon provider that Guild Wars 2 has to offer. But damage isn't the only thing you bring. Baked into your build for free, you have immense levels of CC to carry break bars all by yourself. You can more or less pick and choose whatever weapons you prefer to suit your refined taste. And if you can stomach a small DPS loss, you can load up this build with so much self-healing you won't even notice when your healer's pizza delivery arrives and they need to go AFK to answer the door. So with all the wonderful things ahead of us, let's dive in. First up, Deadeye is the elite specialization for Thief that came out with Path of Fire. The biggest change you'll see once you become a Deadeye is that your steal skill is now replaced by Deadeye's Mark, which will grant you new stolen skills, and when you use a skill that uses initiative, you'll generate Malice, these orbs sitting above your health bar. You'll either gain 1 Malice when your initiative skill hits your mark target, or 2 if the skill crits. So critting all the time is going to be super important for us. Malice interacts with a lot of Deadeye's traits and skills, but the main impact on today's build is that when you use a stolen skill, when capped at 5 Malice, you'll enter stealth. This will actually be very important when it comes to our rotation later. Aside from that, you'll be able to use the new cantrips, which we'll be making great use of, and rifle as a new weapon, which is a great ranged DPS option. With our trait choices today, we're going to be focusing on using our stolen skills as much as possible, which will end up providing quickness to ourselves and our allies. That's all we need to know to get started, so let's jump on into the gear. For our gear, we're going to be rocking Berserker's gear with an Assassin's backpiece. Ideally, you'd also add in 5 precision infusions to perfectly optimize your build and then fill out the remaining slots with power infusions. I've included a version of the gear that doesn't need any infusions in the description below. You'll add in Assassin shoulders and gloves, but honestly, the difference is so minor that I'd recommend just going for the fully optimized gear set. It's simple to gear, the difference is minimal, plus you don't need to worry about stat swapping your armor later if you want to be a greedy little DPS goblin.
Hello, my dear.
Now, that was a bit of a segue, but back to the rest of the gear. You'll want to use Rune of the Dragon Hunter, which will give you slightly better results compared to Scholar Runes. Again, the difference is tiny, so if you already have Scholar Runes, just keep them honestly. For our sigils, we'll be using Sigil of Force and Impact, just the go-to power DPS options. And for our Relic, we'll be using Relic of the Deadeye, which will give you an extra 10% damage for 8 seconds after you use a cantrip skill. A nice change you can make if you want to trade some damage for survivability is to swap in the Relic of Zakharos, which will convert 4% of your critical strike damage into healing. This also stacks with your trait Invigorating Precision, which lets you easily out-heal the extreme damaging AoE in the Golem room, which is absolutely bonkers on a build like this. We'll be making use of a ton of cantrips in this build, so the Relic of the Deadeye is great value though. For our food and utility, we'll simply be taking the best power and ferocity food you can afford. So sous vide steaks ideally, as well as superior sharpening stones. For our weapons, we actually have a ton of flexibility. If you want the most damage possible, then run Staff and Dagger on swap. However, you could run either Staff or Daggers by themselves and you'd be totally fine. Personally, I like running one or the other. It simplifies the rotation massively. On Staff, your auto attack chain will simply deal some damage and vulnerability on the last strike. The last strike also has a very satisfying sound. Weakening Charge is your highest damaging skill on Staff and what you're going to be burning all of your initiative on. You'll spin forwards, attack 3 times, and apply weakness. It's also a whirl finisher for good measure. Just be aware that you can't move while performing this animation, so try not to spam it when you think you'll need to move out of harm's way soon. Debilitating Arc will deal damage, cripple your target, and cause you to evade backwards. It then flips over to the skill Helmet Breaker, which will simply daze your target. The cool thing here though is that if you land Helmet Breaker, you can use it again immediately. This means that you can spam ungodly levels of CC just by spamming your 3 skill. Dust Strike will blind enemies and give you a short 1-second projectile reflect. Vault, in my opinion, is one of the most fun skills in the game. You'll leap to your targeted location for a nice spike of damage and an evade in the process. Unfortunately, it's a bit expensive in terms of initiative, but you can use it to position yourself during combat. Plus, it's incredibly satisfying. Your stealth attack, Malicious Hook Strike, will knock down your target and is a nice source of CC. It is a DPS loss compared to spamming in Weakening Strike, so just keep that in mind. For Dagger, your auto attack will simply deal some damage and inflict bleeding bleeding, and poison. Heartseeker will cause you to leap at your target, strike them, and does more damage the less health that they have. Once your target gets below 25% health, when this damage bonus caps out, you'll want to start burning all your initiative, spamming Heartseeker. Death Blossom and Dancing Dagger aren't particularly relevant for today's power build, but you can use Death Blossom as an evade in a pinch, which is very nice if you run out of endurance. Cloak and Dagger will damage your target, inflict vulnerability, and stealth you, which opens the door for Malicious Backstab, which will deal a huge spike of damage, which doubles if you hit your target from behind or the side, or if they have a Defiance bar. It will also grant 10% extra damage depending on how much Malice you consume when you use it. So ideally, we want to use this when you're capped out at 5 Malice for a spicy extra 50% damage. Like I mentioned before, you can pick either one of these weapons if you want to simplify your rotation and only worry about one set of skills. This leaves you open to have a range weapon on swap in case you need it. Rifle is your highest DPS option, whereas Pistol has the single easiest DPS rotation imaginable. I won't cover these weapons in detail today, but let me know in the comments below if you want to see any rifle and pistol builds in the future. For our utility skills, Malicious Restoration is a massive heal, transfers 3 of your conditions to your marked target, and due to your trait 1 in the chamber will give you another stolen skill charge. The passive for Assassin Signet will grant you an extra 180 power, and you can also activate it to give you 540 extra power for 5 seconds. Mercy is probably your single most important skill on Deadeye, especially if you're running staff. First off, it's a stun break, nice. It will also grant you 3 initiative by default and an extra 1 initiative for each stack of Malice you have when you activate it, so a total of 8 initiative if you time it right. It also comes with 2 charges, so you can use this to generate insane levels of initiative to spam your money skills. And because it's a cantrip, it will also give you a stolen skill due to 1 in the chamber. Shadow Flare will damage your foes at your targeted location, and you can then reactivate it to port to this location and deal a bit of extra damage. Ideally, you'll always want to activate this for the extra damage, as long as it doesn't put you in a dangerous location. Once again, it's a cantrip, so you get another stolen skill. Thieves Guild will simply summon up a few friendos for some extra damage. Take this if you don't need any extra CC. Binding Shadow can replace Shadow Flare if you need some extra CC and don't want to deal with activating Shadow Flare twice. It can also remove 2 boons, which is becoming more and more useful with each new encounter ArenaNet releases. Basilisk Venom is a god tier CC skill, which allows you to share a venom with your allies that turns your target to stone and deals 150 breakbar damage each, for a whopping total of 750 breakbar damage. Shadow Meld will give you extra stealth to trigger Malicious Backstab and is another cantrip for extra steal time cast. This is a great thing to use on Dagger if you have a charge of steal time ready, so you can do Cloak and Dagger, Backstab, Steal Time, Shadow Meld, Backstab again. Taking this allows you to easily overcap on quickness, so if you're struggling with boon uptime, this is a nice option. For our traits, Deadly Arts is here to grant you a bunch of damage modifiers as well as some extra power. Dagger Training will grant you some bonus power and even more when you have a dagger equipped. Even if you don't use a dagger, this is still the best choice for maximum damage. Revealed Training grants you extra power and even more when you are revealed. Again, this pairs best with Dagger due to the stealth it grants, but is still the best choice in terms of power damage for other weapon sets. Executioner will cause you to deal an extra 20% damage when your target is below 50% HP. This is a massive damage modifier and really amps up your damage in the later half of fights. Critical Strikes is all about amping up your critical hits and ensuring you have as much fury uptime as possible. Keen Observer, even though it's a minor trait, it's very important for power thief builds. This trait will give you an extra 10% critical chance permanently, but an extra 15% crit chance when you're above 50% health. Critting 100% of the time is incredibly important for power builds because for every time you don't crit, you're missing out on a huge portion of your damage. So yeah, this crit chance is important. Try and stay above 50% health as much as possible to maximize your damage. Twin Fangs will cause you to deal more damage on critical hits and will increase this further when you're above 50% health. It's basically the last trait Keen Observer, but for critical damage instead of critical chance. Practice Tolerance will simply grant you extra ferocity based on your precision. A nice, simple damage increase. And no quarter will make it so that when you crit, whenever you have fury, you'll extend the duration of your fury as well as grant you an extra 250 ferocity whenever you have fury. So this simply amps up the damage of your crits and grants you more fury, so you can crit more more often. If you want to trade some damage for insane survivability, feel free to swap out no quarter for invigorating precision. This will make it so that you heal for a percentage of your critical damage. You will definitely notice this as soon as you equip it. Deadeye is where the magic happens when it comes to quickness. So everything we pick here is going to be focused on applying as much quickness as possible, as well as amping up your damage when we have no other good choice. One in the chamber will make it so that whenever you cast a cantrip, you'll get a new stolen skill at random, and makes your stolen skills do more damage. Once we get to our Grandmaster trait, Fire for Effect, we'll remove the random component of this trait. Premeditation will simply make you deal an extra 1% damage per boon on you, and grant you some extra concentration. This is mostly here for the extra damage modifier, but the extra boon duration does make your life that little bit easier. Now, Fire for Effect, it does two things. First, it makes it so that whenever you use the stolen skill, you'll grant 8 stacks of might and fury to those around you. It also makes it so that every single time you get a stolen skill, it will be the skill Steal Time, which will provide quickness to allies and slow your target. This trait, as well as one in the chamber, means that whenever you use a cantrip, you'll be able to pump out quickness with Steal Time. These traits make the entire build function. Now it's time for our rotation. For our staff opener, we are first going to mark our target, Steal Time, Shadow Flare, and we'll shadow swap whenever it's convenient. Use Staff 2 3 times, Steal Time, Staff 2, and Mercy, Steal Time again. Deadeye's Mark, spam Staff 2 3 times, Steal Time, Staff 2, 1 auto attack chain, Staff 2, another auto attack chain, Mercy, Steal Time, Deadeye's Mark, Staff 2 3 more times, Steal Time again. From here, we'd either swap to daggers if you have them equipped, or just fall into a bit of a staff priority list. A quick segue here while I explain why some things in the staff rotation are how they are. We obviously want to spam Staff 2 as much as possible, so whenever we have excess initiative, we'll be using it on that. This is also why we're using Mercy as much as we are here. We're using it to generate as much initiative as possible for us to dump into Staff 2. We also generally want to use Staff 2 immediately after we use Steal Time. One of the features of Steal Time is that when you use it when you're capped on Malice, you will enter Stealth. Here, after using Staff 2 3 times, you'll be capped out on Malice and ready to enter Stealth. This is great if you need the extra CC from Malicious Hook Strike, but it's a DPS loss compared to Staff 2. So instead of using Hook Strike after going into Stealth, we're instead going to use Staff 2 to force ourselves out of Stealth and start blasting our damage. If you want to stay camping on staff, your rotation basically boils down to use Staff 2 whenever you have initiative, use cantrips as soon as they come off cooldown, use Mercy to refill initiative whenever it's available, use Steal Time as much as possible, fill the rest of your time with auto attacks. Now, if you want to swap to daggers, before you leave staff, use your Steal Time you have saved up to enter Stealth. Immediately weapon swap and use Malicious Backstab. From here, you're going to do 3 auto attack chains or 2 if you use a cantrip or Steal Time, Cloak and Dagger, Malicious Backstab. Do this Cloak and Dagger backstab combo 3 times, then swap back to staff, and then just work through the priority list that we mentioned before. If you want to swap back to dagger, make sure you have a charge of Steal Time set aside so you can use it, enter Stealth, swap back to dagger, and then immediately use Malicious Backstab. Once your target gets below 25% health, daggers start doing bonkers amounts of damage. From here, you can simply camp daggers and dump all your initiative into Dagger 2. Wait until your Malice is capped at 5, and then use Steal Time to enter Stealth and use Malicious Backstab. Your dagger basically plays like staff, with you auto-attacking, spamming Dagger 2, and using cantrips whenever they're available. For some other quick tips, you can activate your Assassin Signet during your opening burst with Shadow Flare if you want to squeeze out a bit more damage, but it's a small increase, so feel free to leave it on passive to simplify your rotation. Activate it when you know a boss is about to phase for some extra free damage. It should be off cooldown when the boss comes back. And that, my friends, is everything you need to know about the highest damaging boon DPS build in the game, Quickness Deadeye. Not only do we have insane levels of damage, we have godlike levels of CC, incredible weapon flexibility, and the option to trade some damage for insane levels of personal survivability. Not only that, this is actually quite simple to play and is going to leave all your DPS friends sweating. Let me know in the comments below what other builds you'd like me to cover, and until then, I'll catch you all next time. Cheers.